Hey there. Apparently, there's a time limit on the videos that I can do, so that's fine. We'll work with it. So, up next, we're going to be talking about the sun in the fourth house of astrology, and that's like very much my one of my favorites because a lot of the closest people to me have their sun in the fourth house, which is perfect because I have my sun in the eighth house, and the fourth house represents it's one of those houses that I don't think are generally described very well. I think that like it does represent the home and the mother, but these are like all that I see on some astrology websites, and I'm like, no. A lot of fourth house suns are amazingly creative, and the term womb wisdom really comes into my mind. Like somebody who just like instinctively knows how to nurture and how to take care of someone, especially depending on the sign. So when someone has their sun in the fourth house of their horoscope, this can give someone who is very like emotional and kind of like always sort of emotionally processing their like subjective like emotional experiences and reactions depending on especially depending on the sign, like I said. But I think that like really the ability to be creative in ways to help people and the ability to be creative about like just ways of taking care of themselves. I think that creativity is one of the things that is missed so often about the fourth house. Also, when these people get into relationships, especially once it's like it's done, like once like they feel like they can give their heart, then after that it can be kind of challenging, like to let go a little bit of these relationships that just seem to come and go throughout all of our lives. I think that like the ability to protect those that they love and the ability to mother those that they love are quite strong in a fourth house sun. It's like their ego needs to protect those that are in its care, in its custody. My best friend has her sun in the fourth house, and I very much feel like that is something that she does for me. Like she just is like, oh, it's okay, and just it's gonna be all right, little crazy eighth houser, So when somebody has their sun in the fifth house, they can be very, they can take on a Leo tinge, even though the sign is kind of like the traits and the house placement is like the area of life. They can take on a really like dramatic and like just very like they can really speak and people will listen. The fifth house represents like creative self-expression and like a willingness to play and to be kind of like I don't know, like just a little light for other people. At least that's like the way that I see the fifth housers in my life. I think that the fifth house is kind of like it's like if you have like a really work oriented chart, then that's good because that'll prevent you from like just delving too much into the things of play. But if you have your sun sign, or if your chart is all very, like say there's a lot of Jupiter tinges in there, then you're going to have a hard time kind of like, going home instead of going to the bar so that you can get up early so that you can, succeed in your life. I think that like someone can get lost in the things of the fifth house because it's so fun. It's like, who wants to go to work when you could just play all day and have a great time? I think also these people have like a very powerful presence in the arts, and that like arts are something that that they can really take up space in that domain because they're very inherently talented in whatever art form they come into contact with. And also, as far as relationships are concerned, I think that like a fifth house sun can really have a lot of casual trysts over the course of its life, especially depending on what's going on in the rest of the chart. But it's like a very casual, kind of like shallow surface dating space. Um, yeah, and I love the fifth house because I am a Leo sun, and so it's kind of like when I meet a fifth house sun, I identify with them right away. Um, so, Sun in the sixth house is going to take on a Virgo, kind of like a manifestation. The sun sign in the sixth house is hard because the sun is about me and my ego expression and how am I going to assert myself. But the sixth house is very much like about kind of like serving other people and kind of like getting into um, like needing to serve other people, and like kind of like not really wanting the focus or even like the expression to be from themselves. Like they would just rather kind of go behind the scenes and do all the things. I think that like the sixth house sun has a really good way of organizing their environment. They can be workhorses. They can like literally come into a place that is like workaholic a little bit, like where like people depend on them too much at their job, or the people in their lives depend on them too much in general. And I think that that can be challenging. Like I think that like that's got to be a difficult plight. But also like there's serious talent found in their work and in their work life. Like they are really good at it. And so in a way, it's like you spend time doing what you're good at. And that's, it's good. And it's also kind of like, it's a tough plight, kind of like the sun in the eighth house is a tough plight. But I get it because I have, we all have our stuff. I think that the need to avoid the spotlight and the need to organize and categorize their environment and to have everything in its proper place. And also, like, the inability to sometimes be served and to be recognized can be challenging because their efforts are definitely worth recognition. So when you have your sun coming into the seventh house, which is related to Libra, this can be a challenging position, just like the sixth house, because the sun is like your own personal ego expression and your essential you-ness. It's like the thing that kind of keeps you going. It's like, I think that when it comes into the house of other people and partners and relationships, then the happiness of the person, just like with a Libra sun, can really be contingent on the happiness and the harmony and balance and relationships with other people in their lives. I think that, like, if someone with a seventh house sun ends up alone, like, entirely without a support system, like, they might feel, like, frozen in time or like they can't move. And this is a placement that very much seeks out, like, not just romantic relationships, but also friendships, and then having that supportive base of people to like continually lift them up really helps them. But it's good to do that for yourself, is what I think. Like I feel like it's really good to do that, but for yourself, and to have that be like a thing to work towards as a seventh house sun. So now here we get to the eighth house, which is my house. My house. I have an eighth house stellium, so I get really excited when we talk about it. A stellium is just a cluster of planets, but the eighth house is the house of sex and death and metaphysical things and occult sciences and trauma and crisis and everything that you can't talk about at the dinner table. And it's like taxes and other people's money and other people's emotional baggage. And like when you have the sun here, it's lighting up and like illuminating the darkest house. So these are like, this is like what you wear on your sleeves sometimes. Depends on like the sign, I think, in the house, or the aspects rather, because some eighth house suns are very much about, like myself, I would say that I'm very much about like continual personal growth, and that I have like a magnifying glass to myself at all times, um, and there's a lot of like occult and metaphysical things that kind of make up my identity. And the study of energetics and the study of astrology and tarot and divination and different things have really rounded out my personality, and also made me able to deal with the fact that I'm such a psychic sponge, and that I like these things have like really shown a lot of benefit for me personally. But I've also seen people with eighth house suns have a lot of repressed sexual issues, a lot of like emotional turmoil, and just like turning around and something being wrong, and then turning around and something being wrong again. And then it's like you have to deal with all these things. And that's like the eighth house. It just is. Like at this point, I think I'm fairly comfortable with the intersection between crisis and opportunity. Like I'll throw myself into the line of fire very regularly, especially as a Leo in the eighth house. And it just makes me all jazzed, like it makes me happy. And it's like, where am I going to go from here? This is so exciting. I could do anything, It's like, the one thing though is that I feel like as an eighth house sun, I give a lot of energy into other people and to developing and cultivating other people, and that sometimes people aren't always as willing to do the same thing for me. It's like I know exactly what to say to someone at their darkest hour, and they don't know what to say to me because it's too much, it's too dark, it's too deep, it's too complex. It's like, no. Most people, my friend Morgan says that I'm here to rip my heart out and feed it to myself over and over and over again in this lifetime, and that's like that's my plight, but it's not everybody else's plight. So you just have to be careful and know that that not everybody is in the same boat with that stuff. All right, and it's related to Scorpio. I don't know if I said that. Obviously, Scorpio is the phoenix that rises from the ashes over and over again. So if you have your sun in the ninth house in astrology, you can be very, your ego expression can really be contingent on your belief system, and you can be very, like, not fanatical. Depending on the aspects, you can be a little bit fanatical when it comes to your belief system, but I think for the most part, like, a ninth house sun is going to be very, very positive, very idealistic, and very outgoing, and like willing to share and receive like that kind of information. And mostly like the ninth house is a very spiritual place. So when I say higher learning, sometimes that does mean like, master's, PhD, these courses that you can take. But I think that a ninth house sun, it could also, higher learning could also be like higher learning, like as in like spiritual learning, whereas Mercury or like the third house would be like lower learning, like stuff of this material world learning. But I think that like you can get into a lot of really sacred texts, and like you can be a studier of all the religions, or you can really hold true to one, or you can be completely against it. But that belief, whatever it is, can really be with you, like in your day-to-day life, I think. And also the ability, like there's a like kind of a thirst for knowledge of all kinds when you have your sun in the eighth house. Just, I think the ability to listen to other people and their beliefs, and to not just kind of like cast other people's beliefs down right away, is a really good trait to have as a ninth house sun. It's like something that you need to incorporate in also the ability to kind of keep your eyes gazed upon the details and like the little stuff that can fall through the cracks. I think a ninth house sun could very easily miss those things. So when you have your sun sign coming into the 10th house, it's very, that's a career-oriented house. And also it's like the world out there. It's like the like world that's away from your home, which is like the 4th house is like your subjective internal nature and like your home. Like it's like a homebody house, but like the 10th house is your, it's your career. It's like the public profile of you and like the legacy that you're supposed to leave behind in this lifetime, I think. And so when somebody has their sun in the 10th house, it can be very, they can be very fixed upon their career, and like the way that they're fixed upon it, I think, depends on the sign that comes into the 10th house. Like if you're a Pisces sun in the 10th house, you might be confused or like lost for a while in terms of your career direction, but then once you find it, and it becomes important, and it's an important question in your life regardless. I think also having the sun in the 10th house, it can make you really sensitive to criticism regarding your career, and it can really, like, your ego is out there. So it's like when people see that your ego is fixed in this place, it's like some people who are mischievous and a-holes kind of want to poke little holes in that bubble, the 10th house, you know? I think that the 10th house is related to Capricorn, so there's like a steady building over the course of time of like career orientation and also like what it is you actually want to do for a living. So when you have your sun in the 11th house is related to Aquarius. It can rule groups and friends and groups and friends and groups and friends and like networks and hopes and fears and like long-term gains, like windfalls, financial windfalls that can come into your life. I think if you have the sun in the 11th house, then you put a lot of focus on the collective and like the desires of the collective. And it's like you have like an idealistic view of what the world should be like. Also, you can be very focused on making friends and developing a network and being able to move about your little network of friends in your life, and hopefully it'll span multiple countries. I mean, that's like the optimal thing, I think, for an 11th house sun is to be able to have people all over the world that they could call upon or, you know, just to talk to communicate with. The 11th house is a communication-driven house, I believe. It's just like, it can also make you very comfortable in groups, and you have no problem asserting yourself in a group, whereas like the 11th house is like not my house. And like somebody who has the sun negatively aspected in the 11th house can be very socially anxious. But if somebody has like positive 11th house outcomes, then they can be like the leader of a group, the most fair and just and humanitarian leader of a group. So when the sun comes into the 12th house, this is the last house. It's related to Pisces, and in that way kind of takes with it the traits of all the houses and puts it into the one last house. When somebody has their sun in the 12th house, which represents all the things that aren't really readily seen, the 12th house sun person can become like a seer. It illuminates for them all the things that you can't really see. And that's like kind of like the stuff, like the emotional and the spiritual stuff of the collective unconscious. And I know several 12th house suns that work in religious organizations. They work as energy healers and shamans and spiritual people because they can so easily see what's on the spiritual plane, whereas like maybe the other houses can't really see that stuff, you know. Um, or maybe they can just feel it. But I feel like the 12th house sun is very much a seer of all of the things that are unconscious and not on the surface, really. It's a challenging place to be. I think that that a lot of people with their sun in the 12th house feel the need to dole out this like unconditional affection and like healing wisdom or love or whatever it is in order to receive love themselves, but that's not always really the case. Like you don't really have to rely on those things to bring people around you, and that you are worthy of love. So yeah, this is my interpretation of the sun through all the houses, and I hope that you enjoy. If you'd like a reading from me, you can email me at meredithsluckystars@gmail.com. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Bye.